With the top 10 showdown between the Ohio State Buckeyes and Indiana Hoosiers looming this Saturday afternoon, I am here today with 11 Warriors Colin Hass-Hill to talk a little Buckeyes, get caught up in the last few weeks of Ohio State football, and to preview the Ohio State-IU matchup that is surprisingly could very well be the game of the season in the Big Ten. I don't know if that is good for IU because they're doing so well, or if that's like shows you how bad the Big Ten is so far this year or what. But top 10, basically whoever wins this game has a very good shot to win the Big Ten East. What do you have to say about it, Colin?
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. It's it's an interesting one where, I was someone who during the summer, I was an Indiana optimist. I think when you looked at their original schedule, which again is like 2 schedules ago, you looked at it and you thought, maybe Indiana could, start out the gates 6-1, something like that. And, maybe enter the Ohio State game and make that some sort of a top 15, top 20 matchup. But, it's been fascinating to see them because, from the outside, it's like, you watch Tom Allen and like I've told some other people this, like he's just like a guy who like I would like to play for. like he just gives off great vibes. He's someone who it's so obvious that everybody believes in him and everybody thinks that, he's the right kind of guy, but the other side of that is, if you look at how talented Indiana is, like 247 does this sort of composite tracker where they look at the entirety of the roster and they look at all of the talent based on recruiting rankings. Indiana's 13th out of 14 schools in the Big Ten. So I think what they've done to get to this point where this is a top 10 matchup, I think that's a lot credit to what Tom Allen has done and also to the fact that there are a lot of veterans on this roster on both sides of the ball, and Michael Penix is a good quarterback. At the end of the day, though, what Ohio State has on offense and Justin Fields, Chris Olave, and Garrett Wilson, until they get stopped, until some team figures out a way to slow them down, like there's a reason why Ohio State's a 3-touchdown favorite, and it's largely because of that, even though the Hoosiers are deservedly a really good story thus far.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to jinx anything. I'll knock on wood, but it's almost like Ohio State is the varsity team in the Big Ten, and IU is the best junior varsity team in the Big Ten. So far. I mean, Saturday, it could change, but it's even like Vegas, like you said, Ohio State is 3-touchdown favorites against the top 10 team and the second best team in the conference. That basically tells you how dominant the Buckeyes have been, or how dominant they're supposed to be.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot to me for the Big Ten because, I mean, if you just look around, for the last few years, I mean, dating back to the Urban Meyer era, you've always had Penn State and Michigan lingering in the second tier of the Big Ten East. And it just feels like as the years progressed, clearly they're not in the second tier right now. But even going forward, you wonder, are those 2 teams going to be the ones that are challenging Ohio State every year, making close games? Or is there a spot for an Indiana to get through there and build some momentum as a program? Tom Allen stays maybe a little longer than some people think. If he has an opportunity to go to a bigger job, he turns it down. And is that something that he can do? I think this weekend is the first time that we really see, how competitive they can make it with a roster that's really not even close to as talented as Ohio State. And how good of a job Tom Allen can do coaching at such a talent deficit. I mean, I look at, Michigan State back in the day when Mark D'Antonio had it rolling, even those teams were more talented, significantly so than this Indiana team. But I think you can at least see signs on Saturday if, Indiana has potential to get to that point. I think that's an interesting part of it too. But yeah, like I talked about the talent deficiency that Indiana has compared to Ohio State. It still has a chance to be a really good game. Like Indiana's a legitimately good team this year, and I don't think that should be overlooked, even if the Buckeyes are a 3-touchdown favorite.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the talent, it's not even close. But if a team believes in its head coach, and I don't know if to anyone listening, go watch some of IU's post-game celebrations. It's like all about Tom Allen. They believe in their coach. They'll do anything for their coach. And when you have guys that are bought in, plus a really good quarterback like Michael Penix, I mean, you can be as good as IU is. You can surprise people just like IU has been so far. I mean, they're 4-0. No one expected them to be 4-0. I mean, this we even talk about is IU becoming a football school. I'm sure that's a little bit of a joke, but it shows you how good the Hoosiers have been on the football field too.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, Indiana can be as good as Indiana is. It's still probably not going to be a football school, but like Indiana's not supposed to be this good. Like this roster, when as it's constructed, if you look at how talented these guys were coming out of high school, like it's not supposed to be this good. Tom Allen is a legitimately really good coach, and I'm fascinated to just see how much of a fight they can put up, knowing the kind of talent disadvantage that they're going to go against.
For sure. I mean, yeah, for them to win or for it to even be close, I think they literally have to play perfect, while Ohio State has a few mistakes. But if they've shown anything through the first 4 games of the season, it's that they can do that. And I know the game's in Columbus, but there's literally no fans in the stands, so it's not like this would be a home field advantage much for the Buckeyes. But yeah, I mean, you can't really talk down about what Tom Allen has done at IU so far, and it's the reason why they're a top 10 team in the country right now, even if they're like a huge step down from Ohio State, who is obviously one of the best teams in the country and the top team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I think if you were to look at, what are some areas that are going to be important for Ohio State this weekend, I think that, it's just like, to me, it's just a certainty about what this offense does and what this offense can be, especially through the air, and what Justin Fields does. And until someone slows it down in some way, I'm just going to assume that they're going to be awesome. I'm going to assume that they're going to do great things, because I have no reason to not believe that to be the case. So I think if you look at the other side of the ball, I think that's one of the areas that's going to be fascinating, because Indiana's not a team that has really run the ball well at all. And I think that Ohio State, for all the people who, were sort of, not so happy with the Rutgers performance, I think a lot of that was fairly overblown. I think that Ohio State's front 7 against the run has been really, really good. And I Stevie Scott is someone who, he came into the year, he was a 1,000-yard rusher the year before. I was expecting a little bit more out of him early on, but I think that Indiana's offensive line is not, it's certainly not going to be the best offensive line that Ohio State faces this year. I think that that's an area that you expect the Buckeyes to win. And then it's Michael Penix versus, Ohio State's defensive backfield. And that's going to be the interesting part, because we've seen a lot of teams try and run the ball in Ohio State thus far, but they really haven't faced a competent passing game at all. I mean, Rutgers quarterback so far this year is more interceptions than touchdowns. Nebraska is floating back and forth between, 2 quarterbacks. It's Ohio State hasn't faced the kind of passing attack that it will on Saturday. And not to say that Michael Penix is Trevor Lawrence, because that would be overboard. Like, they will face a better passing game down the line at some point, but this is really the first true test. And I think that you look at what these defensive ends can be, and I think they've been solid so far, but they haven't needed to be more than solid. I think they need to be more than solid, because they need to get some sort of pass rush on Penix. And then these defensive backs, I think Sevyn Banks has been pretty good under the radar. I think Josh Proctor has been pretty good under the radar. Marcus Hooker's been solid in coverage. And I'm interested to see, when they're going to face better wide receivers. Peyton Hendershot at tight ends is an interesting guy too. And Michael Penix is the best quarterback they've faced, how they perform.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been so many question marks about the defense. I mean, it's kind of been up and down. The defensive line has been pretty good. Defensive backfield has been iffy at times. Linebackers have been pretty solid. But the number one thing is Ohio State's offense is so good that it doesn't really matter how bad the defense is, at least through the first 3 games of the season. I was to say 4, but their game last week got canceled.
I don't even – to just jump in real quick. I don't think the defense has been bad at all. I think a lot of that's been totally overblown. And I understand why, because if you look at the scores of the games, they're not 62-0. Like like the other teams are technically scoring points, but even that Rutgers game, when Rutgers scores 24 points in the second half, like a lot of that is due to a couple of things. One, like just poorly timed penalties, and 2, like you have to be specific when I think when you talk about this defense, because Marcus Hooker missed about 4 or 5 tackles in that game. And if he doesn't miss those tackles, it's a completely different game. So it's not like to me, it's not a defensive backfield issue. It's Marcus Hooker's tackling issues we're concerned. And it's not any coverage issues. It's Sean Wade going for interceptions instead of, trying to bat down passes. I think the defensive line has been really good thus far, especially against the run. I think the linebackers have been really good. So I actually think this defense has been pretty good. Now it's not going to, you don't have a star-laden defense like last year with Chase Young and Jeff Okudah and Damon Arnett, but I think you can pinpoint the areas of concern maybe more so than people have thus far. And they're, to be honest, I don't really think there are as many as people think there are.
Absolutely. I guess I do kind of agree with that. It's just that I feel like Ohio State wants perfection at every single part of the game, whether it's offense. So does
the fan base, yeah.
Yeah, and so does the fan base. So when there's not perfection, there's worries. And I know Shaun Wade, I know you brought up Shaun Wade. He struggled a little bit, but I know he also said recently, I think it was either this week or late last week, that he has been going for interceptions rather than just trying to bat the ball down, which is huge. I mean, because if you don't catch the ball on an interception, you're leaving the guy wide open, just like he has been a few times. So if he can change that, if he changes the mindset, maybe he'll show once again that he's a first-round draft pick in the 2021 NFL draft, much like many projected him to be prior to the season. But who knows? But like I said, when a fan base and a team wants perfection at every area of the field, even 90% isn't good enough. And I feel like that, like giving up 27 points to Rutgers, it's Rutgers. Why are you giving up 27 points? But then again, they still dominated. The game wasn't close in the start. So what else could you want?
Yeah, and I understand it. Like, I think that the one thing this team needs to do is just play better for 4 quarters. And also, like I mentioned, that there are specific things, but if those specific things happen at the wrong time, it can sink you. So, like, I don't want to completely gloss over it. I just like to – I think it's beneficial to be more specific, because I think the defense as a whole has actually, generally been good. I think there are just some areas – that need improvement, and there's enough time, and the schedule is not a murderer's row, so they will have enough time as long as the coaching is good, that I think that this defense will be solid going into the postseason.
For sure, and it'll be interesting this weekend to see how much the defensive line dominates, because I know Michael Penix and that passing attack are really good, well, really solid. I wouldn't say really good, but they're good. It's the best one Ohio State's seen so far this season. But if the defensive line can always be in IU's backfield, that's going to change so much, especially when I know Stevie Scott is also good, but he only has 319 yards in 4 games. So I wouldn't, if they had to lean more on Stevie Scott rather than the passing attack, that changes so much defensively for Ohio State. And it also forces IU to go do something that they're not trying to do. They're trying to beat Ohio State in the passing game. So if they have to run the ball because the defensive line is dominating so much, that's to change the whole mindset of the Hoosiers as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to, they want to take a multifaceted approach. The issue is going to be, if, as I sort of projecting, is they're not going to be able to run the ball. And then I just don't know that you're going to be able to get that kind of passing success where you're essentially just trying to go blow for blow with Justin Fields, which isn't a particularly fun thing to do.
Yeah, good luck with that. I mean, I don't think anyone can really go blow for blow with Justin Fields besides the Alabamas and Clemsons of the world. And when we're talking about Indiana football, all I'll say is good luck. But who knows? I mean, the Hoosiers have shown a little bit of magic already in 4 games this season. They beat Penn State in overtime. It was an iffy call, but they beat Penn State in overtime. And then they beat Rutgers, Michigan State. So I guess they haven't beaten anyone too good, because Penn State's proven to be not that great of a win, and Michigan only has 1 win on the season. But 4-0 is 4-0, right?
Well, you also have to say, like, who's a good team in the Big Ten other than Ohio State? Like Wisconsin, probably. People think Indiana is, but like you've said, it's not like Indiana has really proven it against a legitimately good team, and that's the problem with the Big Ten. It just feels like to me there's a tier 1 that's Ohio State, and there's a tier 2 that I think Wisconsin or Indiana can play themselves into. But I think that it could just be empty. And there's a lot of teams in tier 3. Like, I think that could legitimately be what this league feels like at the end of the year. So that's one of the reasons why I think Saturday's an interesting game, because I want to see if Indiana can prove that it deserves that higher spot that I think a lot of people, especially in Ohio, probably don't believe it does.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I know Vegas has them as 3 touchdown favorites, but I think if IU even keeps it to like 10 or 14, that's still like it's a huge confidence boost for IU. If it's within single digits, that is like an even bigger confidence boost. Because like me and you both have stated, Ohio State is by far and away the best team in the Big Ten. And like you said, it's tier 1 Ohio State, tier 3 or 4 the rest of the Big Ten. And as I stated, it's the varsity teams, Ohio State, the JV, and maybe even the freshman team is the rest of the Big Ten. It's just such a huge difference. It's a drastic difference between the Buckeyes and anyone else, including IU.
Yeah, I mean, one thing Indiana has done too is, they force a lot of turnovers, and that's not something that I think is typically viewed as something that's sustainable. And they're going to have to do that to beat Ohio State. The thing that Justin Fields does at an elite level is not turn the ball over, and honestly, just not throwing completions. So, if their goal on defense essentially has to be figure out a way to do the impossible, which is to turn Justin Fields over, because that's going to be what's super, super important for them on that side of the ball. It's just one of those things where it's like, how would you predict that to happen? Like, Justin Fields has thrown 3 interceptions in a year and a half as Ohio State starter. I'm not really sure that I'm going to predict that this is the game. I think that, Indiana's defensive backfield is pretty solid. I think they returned 9 starters this year. Like, this is a veteran defense. I think the number one thing for them is they're going to have to figure out a way to just completely shut down this running attack and force Justin Fields to put on a show. And listen, like, Justin Fields can and will put on a show, but you can't have the running backs beat you. You just gotta make it. You gotta try and put the ball in Justin Fields' hands and try and make him make mistakes in a way that he's never done before. The problem with defending this offense is, like, there's no good answers, and that's what I think a lot of teams have sort of learned thus far, and Indiana might learn on Saturday.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it sounds weird, but IU does have to make Justin Fields beat them. Let the running backs do whatever they want, but make Justin Fields beat you. But as we've both seen, if Justin Fields has proven anything this year, it's that he will, and he will do it by a wide margin as well. I mean, he has 11 incompletions this year, 11 passing touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So he has as many incompletions as passing touchdowns, and it has accounted for more touchdowns total than incompletions. And I know you actually did a film or something on it that, like, half of his incompletions have actually been very catchable passes.
Yeah, he has 11 incompletions. I think you can make an argument that 7 of them were catchable. I mean, a couple were just straight up drops. A couple were put in a place where only the receiver could get them, and a couple were just like he threw to the only place that he could and let the receiver make the play, and they just couldn't. But he's playing at an absolutely incredible level, and we only get 4 more regular season games to see him at best. So it's gonna be exciting to see how he finishes the year, because I think he's making the case to everybody that he's the best to ever do it at Ohio State.
Yeah, and while you were talking last, I was looking up the weather. Low 50s and no rain. So IU can't even count as like a bad weather game in order to get a little good luck in there too. It's just to be 40s and 50s and no rain. So that, I don't know. IU has a tough task. They have to hope Justin Fields isn't perfect, much like he has been through the first 3 games of the year. I mean, he has 11 incompletions, but we just discussed how more than half of those have been catchable. But yeah, IU has to play perfectly, and they have to hope that Ohio State makes more mistakes than they usually do.
Yeah, and good luck. I mean, you're asking for the perfect recipe, and I just there's a reason why the line. I just keep going back to it. Like, there's a reason why the line is 3 touchdowns, and it's not because Indiana is a bad team. It's just you just look across how these matchups play out, and you're like, how does Indiana win? And it's like, you shut down Ohio State's run, try and get Justin Fields to make a play or two too many and turn the ball over. The other side of the ball, you just need Michael Penix to just go off. You need this passing game to really click, and you also need to break at least a few runs so Ohio State respects the running game a little bit more. And like, you're asking for a lot to me.
I feel like even if IU does break a few runs, if Steve Scott does break a few runs, that Ohio State's still going to make Michael Penix dominate. I mean, let's be honest. He's going to have to dominate on Saturday if IU has a chance. Not even to keep it close, but to win. He's going to have to play probably better than Justin Fields, to be honest, which, I mean, if the first year and a half of Justin Fields in Columbus has proven anything, it's going to be a very tough task. But on with Ohio State's running game. I know you said that IU will most likely have it be where Justin Fields has to beat them, not the rushing attack. But how do you feel about Trey Sermon and Master Teague so far this season?
I think at this point, if you're hoping for Trey Sermon to turn it on, I think that's the wrong thing. I just feel like we sort of know what Trey Sermon is, and unless he just pulls something out of nowhere, and what he is I don't think he's really up to the task. I mean, I respect him for giving it a shot and coming to Ohio State and trying to, be the savior Ohio State needed at running back, but he feels a little bit indecisive when he gets the ball. He just doesn't run super hard. He's made very few people miss. So, I do wonder if they're going to go away from him a little bit. And I think that Master Teague has been solid. Like, he's nothing. He's not special. He's not like he's going to win the Heisman Trophy or the Doak Walker Award or anything like that. But he's someone who's not going to set them back. He's not going to be someone who's dancing back there and all of a sudden you're in a 2nd and 12. You're in a 3rd and 11, something like that. He's going to get you a few yards, and then he's going to get you 7 or 8 sometimes. And, I think that's okay this year because you have Justin Fields and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Jeremy Ruckert and all those other guys.
Yeah, like, as you said, Master Teague and Trey Sermon, I mean, they've been average, maybe a little bit above average as a pair so far this year. But against the Big Ten especially, all they have to be is average because you have that passing attack that is seemingly unstoppable. Speaking of the passing attack, with only so Ohio State was already behind, having played with only 8 games on the regular season schedule. Now they have 7 due to last week's Maryland game getting canceled due to COVID-19. Does Ohio State have more to prove now since they only have 7 games? Like, they can't just win football games; they have to dominate football games, right?
I don't know. I mean, if they go undefeated, they're in. I don't really think there's any debate about that. I think if you want to have the debate, it's, if they lose, do they get in? And I think that's just really hard to know. I mean, things have just happened this year. Upsets have happened that, who knows? Like, Trevor Lawrence just goes out for a couple of weeks. He's just COVID-19. Like, who could have possibly predicted that? So I think it's hard to, paint yourself in a box and say if they lose, there's no chance they get in. But, like, look who they play the rest of the year. It's Indiana, Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan in the Big Ten championship. Like, who do you lose to and then still get in? Like, Indiana might be a good team, and if you lose to Indiana, then you're probably not going to the Big Ten championship, and then you're probably not getting in because your best win is against like Michigan and Penn State. So I think that if they win, they're in, and I don't really think that you need style points this year for Ohio State unless you're trying to look for the one-loss bid, and I think that that's going to be hard.
Yeah, I think if they lose, they're out. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. Unless, like, for some reason something happens where someone gets hurt. I mean, I'll never wish an injury on someone. If someone gets hurt or something, like how people said Clemson was still going to be in the playoff because they played without Trevor Lawrence against Notre Dame. Maybe that could be sort of an asterisk, but I think for Ohio State, especially with such a small margin of error, given the 7 games plus a Big Ten championship, they have to win out. And speaking of that, about impressing the voters and stuff, Justin Fields, 7 regular season games. What does he have to do to win the Heisman since he's going to play less games than everyone else that's going to compete for the Heisman Trophy?
Well, I think it's just, it's hard to know. I mean, he's got to not miss games because he gets COVID. Like, you can't have Ohio State miss games because the team has too many positives. Like, that's the obvious stuff. And then it's like, how do you know how the season's going to play out? I think it's just super, super, super hard to really project anything beyond what's happening this weekend. And like, 8 days ago, I thought Ohio State was going to play against Maryland, at this time. So like, things can change really quickly. I don't think what he has to do. I think that he has to just hope that he can play as many games as possible and continue to dominate games and throw like 0 interceptions. I mean, it's hard to know exactly what he has to do. I think that he has to go undefeated and he has to look amazing. And thus far, he's looked amazing and they've been undefeated. So he's still in the running. I don't think it's Justin Fields to lose because I don't think it's anybody's to lose this year. I think it's everybody trying to win it because you just don't know how this thing's going to go for anybody going down the stretch.
I actually love that saying. It's no one's to lose, but everyone just playing to win. I mean, like you said too, if one of the quarterbacks takes COVID, boom, they're out for 1 or 2 games, maybe 3 games, who knows. But yeah, I mean, if Justin Fields keeps playing the way he has been and is right now with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson dominating the passing attack, no matter how many games he plays, he has to be in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. No. And he will be. He will be. I mean, it's just a matter of how this thing plays out. I mean, it's just hard to project. It's hard to project. As long as he stays healthy, he'll be right in there till the end. And if he plays every game the rest of the way, they are undefeated. I think it's fair to assume with almost 100% certainty he'll at least be a finalist.
For sure. All right. So predictions for this weekend. Besides, I feel like you're going to say Ohio State wins, but score prediction, and who do you think would be like the MVP offensively, not named Justin Fields?
I actually haven't done a score prediction yet, so I'm just sort of calculating in my head. I think Ohio State's offense until I see it get stopped, I think it's going to be essentially unstoppable. Like, that's just sort of my point of view of what Justin Fields is. So I'll say they score 42 points, even though I think Indiana is a good team with a veteran defense that turns people over. I don't think Ohio State's going to turn the ball over as much as other teams Indiana's faced. So I'll say Ohio State scores 42, and I respect Indiana's offense. I'll say 42-21, which is a push. So I guess I'm right there with Vegas.
And it's crazy how you were trying your best to speak highly of IU, and you still have them losing by 21. That just shows the difference between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten, as we've been saying.
Yeah, I mean, if I don't even think it's the difference between Ohio State and the rest of the Big Ten. I think it's just the difference between having Justin Fields on your team. Like, if this team had CJ Stroud right now, I think it'd be a much more competitive game. But until I see it, I'm just going to assume that, only the top 2 or 3 teams in the country can compete against this team because it has enough talent around Justin Fields, and it has Justin Fields. For sure.
Yeah, I don't know what to expect. I think Ohio State is going to dominate, but I think IU has a lot to play for as well. They want to prove that they are not only one of the best teams in the Big Ten, but one of the best teams in the country. So, yeah, this weekend will certainly be interesting. Hopefully there's no positive COVID tests, so it's good to go. I know right before jumping on this podcast, I saw that the Maryland-Michigan State game is canceled this weekend due to, I think it was Maryland's head coach, or one of the head coaches got a positive test. So hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully Ohio State does play. So at least we get to see the Buckeyes, unlike last weekend. But, yeah, I think it could be a really good game. At the very least, I think it could be a very fun game in Columbus on Saturday.
Yeah, I think me personally, I feel very confident in Ohio State, but I'm willing to be proven wrong. I think I could just be getting this Indiana team wrong and basing a lot of it on the fact that, I feel more confident than most about this defense, and I think Justin Fields is awesome. And I also think that the talent gap between the two teams is just so big. And that's just sort of the baseline of why I think that Ohio State's going to win fairly comfortably.
For sure. Yeah, I don't really have a score prediction, but I think I'm pretty close to that 21 Vegas number too, like you had. I just don't see how, even if Ohio State gives up 21 to 28 points defensively, Ohio State's, they're going to score 40 plus. And I don't think this defense will ever, at least against the Big Ten, I don't think they'll ever give up 40 plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's very possible. I think that's very, very possible.
All right. Colin, thanks for joining us. Hopefully, maybe we'll have you on next week. We'll see how the schedule works out. Hopefully, we'll talk about another win. Yeah, and just thanks for coming on. Stay healthy and go Bucks.
I appreciate it. Have a good one.
You too.